Chapter 1. The betrayal. The castle had never felt colder. Alara's footsteps echoed through the stone corridor, each sound a hollow percussion against centuries-old walls that had witnessed countless secrets. She pulled her cloak tighter though. The chill she felt had nothing to do with the autumn wind that slipped through the ancient windows. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from exertion, but from the terrible certainty that had been building in her chest for weeks. Something was wrong. Her husband, Cassius, had been distant. More than distant, absent. He disappeared for days at a time, offering no explanation beyond cryptic warnings about house business and matters she wouldn't understand. 3 months ago, he'd stood before the gathered witnesses and sworn eternal vows to her. 3 months, and already the man who'd promised her forever had become a stranger who avoided her touch and refused to meet her eyes. Tonight, she would have answers. The Eastern Wing was forbidden to her. Cassius had made that clear on their wedding night. "My private chambers," he'd said, his voice carrying that peculiar weight that made her skin prickle. "Promise me you'll never go there without permission." She'd promised, because she'd been in love, because she'd believed in the fairy tale of the mysterious lord who'd chosen her, a merchant's daughter with no title and no fortune, to be his bride. How naive she'd been. Alara paused before the heavy oak door at the corridor's end. Candlelight flickered beneath it, and she heard voices, low, intimate, familiar. Her hand trembled as she reached for the iron handle. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to retreat to her lonely chambers and pretend she hadn't noticed. The lipstick stains on his collar, the perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his skin, the way he flinched when she tried to kiss him. But she'd spent too many nights lying awake, wondering if she was going mad. She needed to see. She needed to know. The door swung open silently. The scene before her didn't shatter her heart, it eviscerated it. Cassius stood near the fireplace, his dark hair disheveled, his shirt unbuttoned. But it was the woman in his arms that made Alara's breath stop. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal. Porcelain skin, crimson lips, eyes that glowed like garnets in the firelight. Her dress was the color of dried blood, and she wore it like a second skin. The woman's hand rested possessively on Cassius's chest. His hand covered hers. "You should have told her the truth from the beginning," the woman purred, her voice like silk over steel. "Mortals are so delicate. This deception will only make the inevitable worse." "Morgana, please." Cassius's voice cracked with something that sounded like anguish. Alara's gasp cut through the room like a blade. Both figures turned. The woman, Morgana, smiled, slow and cruel. But it was Cassius's face that destroyed her. Not guilt, not shame, fear. Pure, undiluted terror flickered across his features as his eyes met hers. "Alara." Her name fell from his lips like a prayer, or a curse. "You shouldn't be here." Clearly, her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant, detached, as though her soul had already fled her body. "How long?" "It's not what you think." "How long?" Each word dropped like a stone into still water. Morgana laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Oh, this is delicious. You really didn't tell her anything, did you?" She circled Cassius like a predator, her movements too fluid, too graceful. "Poor little mortal bride. Did you think you were special? That a man like Cassius would choose you for love?" "Morgana, stop." Cassius's command carried an edge that raised the hairs on Alara's arms, but the woman ignored him. "Tell me, sweet girl, have you never wondered why he only comes to you at night? Why you've never seen him in daylight? Why his skin is always cold? Why he never eats at your table? Why the servants whisper and cross themselves when you pass?" Alara's world tilted. The room spun. Details she'd dismissed, explained away, ignored, they crashed over her like a wave. The way Cassius's eyes sometimes reflected light like an animal's. The unusual strength in his hands. The night she'd cut her finger and he'd fled the room as though she'd brandished a weapon. The nightmares she'd had of teeth and blood and hungry darkness. "What are you?" The question emerged as barely a whisper. Cassius moved toward her, one hand extended. "Alara, let me explain." "Stay back." She stumbled backward, her spine hitting the doorframe. "Don't touch me." "Don't." Her throat closed. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of them. She deserves the truth." "Cassius?" Morgana's voice softened into something almost like pity. "She's already seen too much. The house laws are clear. She knows. She's witnessed. There are only two paths now." "No." Cassius's word was absolute. "I won't let you." "Then what?" Morgana's eyes flashed. "You bound yourself to her under mortal law, but you never completed the blood rites." She's not protected. When the council discovers you've exposed our nature to an outsider, they'll demand her death, or her turning. And you know Lord Theron will choose death. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Alara's legs gave out. She caught herself against the wall, her mind fracturing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Vampires didn't exist. They were stories, legends, fairy tales meant to frighten children. But Cassius's face told her everything. He was a monster, and she was his prey. Chapter 2. The threshold. Elara ran. She didn't remember leaving the room, didn't recall her feet finding purchase on the stone floor or her hands grasping the corridor walls for balance. She only knew that she had to move, had to escape, had to put distance between herself and the truth that had just torn her world apart. Behind her, she heard Cassius call her name, a sound edged with desperation that made her run faster. The castle had become a labyrinth of shadows. Every corner held menace, every flicker of candlelight seemed to conceal watching eyes. The servants she passed pressed themselves against the walls, their faces carefully blank. They'd known. All of them had known what he was, what walked these halls wearing the skin of nobility, and she'd been the fool who'd married into it. Her chambers offered no sanctuary. Alara slammed the door behind her and dragged a chair against it with shaking hands. The furniture wouldn't stop him. Nothing would stop him if he truly wanted to reach her, but the action gave her trembling body something to do besides collapse. She made it 3 steps toward her bed before her knees buckled. The sobs came then, wrenching and ugly, tearing from her chest in waves that left her gasping. Every promise he'd made was a lie. Every tender word, every gentle touch, every moment she'd believed herself loved, all of it built on deception. He'd courted her for 6 months, patient and attentive, making her feel like the heroine of some grand romance. What did vampires want with merchant daughters? What was she to him? A knock shattered her spiral. Go away. Her voice cracked. Alara, please. Cassius's voice filtered through the heavy wood, and despite everything, her treacherous heart lurched at the anguish in it. I need to explain. You're in danger because of you. She surged to her feet, fury burning through the grief. You did this. You brought me here. You married me. Her voice broke. How could you? Silence stretched. Then, open the door, please. I swear on my house name I won't touch you without permission. But there are things you need to understand. Tonight changed everything. You think I'll believe anything you say now? No, the word was heavy with resignation. But if you want to survive the next 3 days, you'll listen anyway. The threat in his words wasn't directed at her. She understood that instinctively. It was a warning. Morgana's words echoed in her mind. The council will demand her death. Alara's hand moved to the door before her mind could override the impulse. She pulled the chair away, turned the lock, and stepped back quickly as the door swung open. Cassius stood in the threshold, and for the first time, she saw him clearly. He was beautiful, devastatingly so, but now she recognized the otherworldly quality of his features. The too perfect symmetry of his face, the unnatural stillness of his posture, the way shadows seemed to cling to him like a second cloak. His dark eyes held centuries she'd mistaken for depth, and his pale skin wasn't the result of spending too much time indoors. He was dead. Had been dead for God knew how long. Don't come closer. She backed toward the window, though she knew there was no escape there. They were 3 stories up, and even if she survived the fall, where would she run? The village was 10 miles away, through dark woods, and night belonged to things like him. I won't. He remained in the doorway, his hands visible and empty. I need you to understand something. What Morgana said, it's true. There are laws, old laws that govern our kind, meant to protect our secrecy. You've seen too much. You know what I am. That knowledge makes you a liability. So kill me. Bitterness coated every word. Isn't that what monsters do? Pain flickered across his face if he could even feel such things. I deserve that. But no, I won't let anyone harm you. That's why I need you to listen. Why? The question burst from her. Why marry me at all? Was this some game? Some bet among your kind to see how long you could fool a human? No, his voice dropped to something raw. Never that. I married you because he stopped, jaw tightening. The reasons don't matter now. What matters is keeping you alive. The reasons are all that matter. Alara's composure shattered. You made me believe I thought you loved me. I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me, who wanted me, not my father's shipping connections or my dowry, but me. And it was all a lie. Not all of it. The words were barely audible. She laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. Which parts were real, Cassius? The vows? The wedding night you couldn't bring yourself to consummate? The way you flinched every time I tried to be close to you? Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Was Morgana your lover before me? During? Is that why you kept me at arm's length, because you were already bound to another? Morgana is not my lover. His hands clenched at his sides. She's a member of House Drackle, one of the 5 ruling families. I'm bound to her through blood oath, a political alliance forged before you were born. She has claim to my loyalty, but not my heart. You don't have a heart. You're dead. Yes. The admission hung between them. I died in 1847. I've walked this earth for 178 years. I've seen empires fall and watched generations turn to dust. I stopped feeling human decades ago. He took one careful step into the room, watching her like she was the dangerous one. Until you. Alara's breath caught. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't you dare try to make this romantic. You lied to me. You used me. You put my life in danger for what? Entertainment? Protection? The words struck like a hammer. I married you to save your life, Alara, and now because I failed to properly bind you to my house, I may have condemned you instead. The room tilted again. What? Cassius's expression hardened into something ancient and cold, the face of a Chapter 3. The sheltered carriage rattled through the night, each jolt reminding Alara that she'd made a choice she couldn't unmake. She'd chosen survival. She'd chosen to trust a monster. The decision had taken less than a minute. Cassius had stood in her doorway, waiting with inhuman patience while her mind raced through impossible options. Run and die. Stay and die. Trust him. And maybe live long enough to understand what her life had become. Now she sat across from him in the darkness, watching his profile as he stared out the window. They'd been traveling for 3 hours, leaving the castle behind without ceremony or explanation. She'd been allowed to pack one bag. Everything else, her books, her mother's jewelry, the wedding dress that had made her feel like a princess, remained in rooms she'd never see again. Where are we going? Her voice broke the oppressive silence. A safe house. One of many I've maintained over the centuries. He didn't look at her. It's remote, warded. The council won't find us there immediately. Immediately, she echoed. But they will eventually. Yes. His honesty was worse than a lie. Alara pulled her cloak tighter, though the cold, she felt, had nothing to do with temperature. What happens when they find us? That depends on many things. Finally, he turned to face her. In the dim lantern light, his features were sharp as cut glass. On how much time we have. On which house finds us first. On whether I can negotiate terms. Terms for what? Your life, your freedom, your future. He paused. Your choice. The last 2 words carried weight. She didn't understand. Alara studied him, this stranger wearing her husband's face. You said you married me to protect me. From what? Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or regret. That's a long story. We appear to have time. The carriage hit a rut, throwing her sideways. Cassius moved with supernatural speed, his hand catching her arm before she could fall. The touch lasted only a second before he released her, but Alara's skin burned where his fingers had been. His skin was cold. Always cold. How had she explained that away? Your father, Cassius said slowly, was in debt to some very dangerous people. Not human people. He'd borrowed from House Corvus to expand his shipping business, and when he couldn't repay them, they came to collect. Alara's breath stopped. No, Papa would never. He was desperate. The plague took half his ships. He needed capital or he'd lose everything. Cassius's voice was carefully neutral. Corvus offered him terms. Generous terms. But vampire gold always comes with strings. What kind of strings? The kind that demand blood payment when coin fails. He met her eyes. They wanted you, Alara, as a blood servant, bound to their house for life, fed upon until you were too broken to be useful, then discarded. The carriage seemed to shrink. You're lying. I wish I were. Cassius leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I heard about the situation through certain channels. I made your father a different offer, one that would clear his debt and protect you simultaneously. Marriage. The word tasted like ash. Marriage under mortal law, which gave you my name and my protection. As long as you were my wife, Corvus couldn't touch you. House law forbids stealing another vampire's chosen bride, but you never. Alara's cheeks heated. We never completed the marriage. Not truly. No, his jaw tightened. Because the final step would have been the blood bond. Once I fed from you, once you accepted my mark, you'd be bound to me completely. Protected under House Ravenwood's banner, yes, but also mine, in ways that can never be undone. You mean I'd become like you, eventually, if that's what you chose. The bond doesn't automatically turn someone that requires a separate ritual, one that can't happen without explicit consent, but it changes you. Ties your life force to mine. You'd feel what I feel, know when I'm in danger, be bound to my house's political obligations. He looked away. I couldn't do that to you without telling you the truth first. And the truth would have terrified you, so instead you let me think I was going mad. Anger flared through her shock. You let me believe you didn't want me, that I'd done something wrong. I know. The words were heavy with something that sounded almost like grief. I told myself I was protecting you, giving you time to adjust, to know me before revealing what I was. I thought I could make it work, keep you safe without the bond, without trapping you in my world. His laugh was bitter. I was a fool. The carriage began to slow. Elara looked out the window and saw nothing but dense forest. Trees pressing close like prison bars. We're here, Cassius said. Here was a stone cottage that looked abandoned. Ivy crawling up walls that had seen better centuries. But when Cassius helped her down from the carriage, his touch careful, impersonal, and led her inside, the interior was surprisingly maintained, clean, prepared. How long have you been planning this? She asked, watching him light candles with practiced efficiency. Since the wedding night. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone discovered what I'd done. He gestured toward a door on the left. That's your room. There's a lock on the inside. Use it. I won't enter without permission. Elara stood in the center of the main room, feeling untethered. Everything she'd known had been stripped away, and now she stood in a stranger's house, dependent on a creature who'd admitted he'd married her as a political maneuver, but he'd also saved her from something worse, something that made her skin crawl to imagine. The woman, Morgana. Elara forced herself to ask, will she tell the council? Cassius's expression hardened. Without question. She's House Drackle. They've wanted to absorb Ravenwood for decades. If the council rules against me, if they demand you be turned or killed, she'll volunteer to carry out the sentence. And through that act, she'll claim right of blood debt which gives Drackle legal grounds to annex my territories. So I'm a pawn in vampire politics. You're a woman who deserves better than any of this. He moved toward the fireplace. Began building a fire with wood that shouldn't have been there. Someone had stalked this place. Someone had prepared for their arrival. But yes, to them, you're leverage. To me, he stopped, shoulders tense. To you what? He didn't answer immediately. The fire caught, casting dancing shadows across his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost missed it. To me, you're the first person in a century who made me remember what it felt like to be human. Chapter 4. The watch Angelera didn't sleep. She lay in the small bedroom, door locked, as Cassius had instructed, and stared at the ceiling beams while her mind replayed every moment of the past 3 months. How many signs had she missed? How many times had he nearly revealed himself, only for her to explain away the impossible? The way he'd kissed her forehead, but never her lips. The separate bedrooms he'd insisted upon. The meals he'd never shared. The daylight hours she'd spent alone. The servants who'd watched her with pity in their eyes. She'd thought herself undesirable. Instead, she'd been protected. The thought tangled in her chest, equal parts gratitude and fury. He'd lied to save her, but the lies had wounded her in ways he couldn't understand. Or perhaps he understood perfectly. He'd lived through countless human lifetimes, watched people love and betray and die. What was one woman's broken heart to a creature who'd survived centuries? To me, you're the first person in a century who made me remember what it felt like to be human. She wanted to dismiss the words as manipulation, but the raw honesty in his voice had been undeniable. Dawn light crept through the shutters. Elara rose, smoothed her wrinkled dress, and unlocked the door. The cottage was silent. She found Cassius in what passed for a study, a small room lined with books and a single desk where maps lay spread like secrets. But he wasn't studying them. He sat motionless in a high-backed chair, his head tilted at an odd angle, his chest perfectly still. Her heart lurched. Cassius? No response. No movement. Not even the subtle rise and fall of breathing, because he didn't breathe. Not during the day. Elara approached slowly, drawn by morbid curiosity. In the gray morning light, he looked like a marble statue, beautiful and cold and utterly lifeless. She'd never seen him like this. He'd always been careful to wake before her, to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Now there was no illusion left to maintain. She studied his face, this man who'd become a stranger. The sharp line of his jaw, the dark lashes against pale cheeks, the mouth that had spoken wedding vows and never kissed her properly. Up close, she could see the faint tracery of veins beneath his skin, darker than they should be, carrying blood that wasn't his own, whose blood sustained him. Where did he feed? The thought made her stumble backward. She'd married a predator, a creature who survived by draining life from others. How many people had he killed? How many victims had he left in his wake? "I need you to see me as I am," he'd said once, weeks ago, his expression troubled. "Not as you imagine me to be." She'd laughed, thinking he meant his flaws, his tendency toward brooding, his obsessive privacy. She'd had no idea he meant it literally. Alara left him there and explored the cottage with growing unease. The kitchen was stocked with food for her, but nothing he could consume. The windows had heavy shutters that locked from inside. The doors bore strange symbols carved into the wood, protective wards, she realized, to keep something out, or perhaps to keep something in. She found his sleeping chamber by accident, a room in the cellar, windowless and sealed. The bed was simple, but made with care. A trunk sat at its foot. Personal items lined a shelf, a pocket watch that had stopped decades ago, a daguerreotype of people she didn't recognize, a book of poetry so worn the cover had lost its title, evidence of a life many lives lived in the spaces between her knowledge. Alara backed out quickly, feeling like an intruder. But wasn't she entitled to answers? He'd brought her here, revealed his nature, turned her world inside out. She deserved to understand exactly who she'd bound herself to. She spent the morning cooking, if only to have something normal to cling to. Bread, soup, simple things that required attention and provided comfort. The mundane task steadied her hands and quieted her racing thoughts. It was late afternoon when she heard movement upstairs. Cassius appeared in the kitchen doorway. His color returned, his chest rising and falling in mimicry of breathing. He looked exactly as he had the night before, down to the same clothes. Did vampires change? Or was everything about him carefully constructed? Performance? "You're awake," she said unnecessarily. The sun set an hour ago. He remained in the doorway, as though waiting for permission to enter. "I should have warned you. During the day, I'm dormant, vulnerable. If you'd wanted to leave, that would have been your opportunity." "I thought about it." She stirred the soup with more force than necessary. "Where would I go? The village, the nearest city, away from me." His voice was carefully neutral. "I wouldn't have stopped you, because you'd have been dead to the world, literally." She set down the spoon and faced him. "How does it work? Do you just stop? Can you be killed while you're like that?" "Yes." The admission was stark. "Sunlight incapacitates us, makes us helpless. A stake through the heart, decapitation. Fire, any of those would end me while I'm day sleeping. It's why we keep our resting places secret. Why we surround ourselves with protections and loyal servants. So this morning, she couldn't finish the sentence. "You could have." He stepped into the kitchen, moving with that unnatural grace. "You didn't." "Why?" Alara didn't have a good answer. Curiosity? Self-preservation? Some twisted remnant of the love she'd thought she felt? "Maybe I wanted answers more than revenge." "That's fair." He glanced at the soup. "You cooked." "I needed something to do besides spiral into madness." She ladled some into a bowl, then stopped. "You don't eat." "I forgot." "I appreciate the gesture regardless." He pulled out a chair, sat down with human-like weariness. "Ask me, whatever you want to know. I owe you honesty at least." The offer was almost overwhelming. Where did she even start? "Do you? Does it hurt? When you feed? For the victim? It can. If done carelessly or cruelly." His expression tightened. "I try to make it painless. I pay donors from a private registry, humans who consent to feeding in exchange for gold. I never take more than they can safely give. And I never feed from the unwilling." "Never?" She heard the skepticism in her own voice. "Not in 70 years." He met her eyes steadily. "I know what I am, Alara. I know I'm a monster. But I choose every night what kind of monster I'll be. Some of us are predators. Others are parasites. I try to be something closer to a necessary evil." That's a convenient rationalization. Perhaps. He didn't look away. Does knowing this make it worse? Would you prefer I pretend to be noble? She sat down across from him, the table, a careful barrier between them. I prefer you tell me the truth, all of it, starting with why Morgana really came to the castle last night. His jaw clenched. She came to warn me. House Corvus discovered I'd blocked their claim on you. They've appealed to the council, arguing I violated protocols by hiding you from their debt collection, and the council has summoned me. 3 nights from now, I must appear before them and defend my actions. If I can't prove legitimate claim to you as my bonded consort, they'll rule in Corvus's favor. He leaned forward, which means they'll take you, and what they'll do to you will make death seem merciful. Chapter 5. The unraveling fire crackled between them, casting shadows that danced like specters across the cottage walls. Elara gripped her teacup so tightly her knuckles whitened, trying to process what Cassius had just told her. What does bonded consort mean exactly? Her voice was steadier than she felt. Cassius rose and moved to the window, his back to her. Even in simple shirt sleeves, he carried himself with the bearing of someone who'd commanded armies. It means a blood bond, a permanent connection between vampire and human. Once completed, you'd be under my house's absolute protection. No other vampire could touch you, feed from you, or claim you. You'd be mine in every way that matters to our laws. And what would you be to me? He turned, his expression unreadable. Bound equally. I couldn't harm you without harming myself. Your pain would be mine. Your death would weaken me, possibly destroy me. The bond works both ways. It's not ownership. It's entanglement. But you'd still be a vampire. Still immortal. Still. She set down the cup before she shattered it. I'd still be human, aging, dying. What happens when I'm 60 and you're still? She gestured at him. That? The bond slows aging. Not dramatically, but noticeably. A bonded human might live twice their natural span, sometimes more. And when the time comes, he paused. You'd have a choice. Accept the turning, or pass naturally, knowing I'd carry you with me until I'm destroyed. The weight of it settled over her like a burial shroud. So my options are, become your eternal prisoner, or be torn apart by House Corvus. There's a third option. His voice dropped. I could attempt to negotiate with the council directly. Offer them something valuable enough to forgive the breach of protocol. Gold, territory, political alliance. What could possibly be worth? She stopped. Yourself. You mean surrender to House Drackle. Let them absorb your house, your lands, everything you've built. Yes. The word was simple, absolute. Elara stood abruptly, pacing to the fireplace. The heat felt good against her skin, proof she was still alive, still capable of feeling something beyond the numb shock that had gripped her for hours. Why would you do that? For me? Because this is my fault. He crossed the room, stopping a careful distance away. I made a choice to intervene in your father's situation. I knew the risks. I knew House Corvus would eventually discover what I'd done. I gambled that I'd have enough time to properly court you, to let you know me before revealing the truth. I gambled wrong. So I'm your mistake. Bitterness leaked through despite her efforts to contain it. No, the force behind the word made her look up. You're the first choice I've made in decades that had nothing to do with strategy or survival or politics. I saw your portrait in your father's study. I heard him speak about you, your kindness, your curiosity, your sharp mind. And then I met you, and you were. He stopped, jaw working. You were sunlight, real and warm and alive. Everything I'd forgotten existed. Her breath caught. Don't romanticize this. I'm not. He moved closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. I'm telling you the truth. You demanded. Yes, I intervened to save you from Corvus. But I married you because somewhere in those 6 months of courtship, I stopped seeing you as a problem to solve. I started seeing you as, he exhaled sharply, as someone I wanted to protect, not out of obligation, but because the thought of you suffering was unbearable. You don't get to say things like that. Her voice cracked. Not after lying to me. Not after letting me think I was undesirable, unwanted. I wanted you. The confession was raw. God help me. I wanted you so badly it terrified me. Every time you smiled at me, every time you touched my hand, I had to remind myself that one wrong move, one moment of lost control, and I'd bind you to me forever, without choice, without understanding what you were agreeing to. So, instead you pushed me away. I tried to give you time, space, a chance to know me as a person before learning I wasn't a person at all. His hands clenched at his sides. I told myself I was being noble, that I was protecting your autonomy. But Morgana was right. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. Let you choose with full knowledge, instead of making that choice for you. Alara sank back into her chair, exhausted. Why did Morgana come that night? Really? She's been watching me for months, waiting for me to make a mistake. He returned to his seat, looking suddenly ancient despite his young face. House Drackle wants my territory, the shipping ports, the trade routes, the political connections. If I fall, they benefit. And she's known me for 50 years. She knows my weaknesses, which are sentiment, attachment, the delusion that I can hold on to pieces of my humanity. He met her eyes. She realized I cared about you. So she orchestrated that scene, deliberately knew you'd come looking for me eventually, knew you'd see us together and jump to conclusions. She wanted you to discover my nature in the worst possible way, wanted to shatter whatever trust existed between us. It worked. The admission hurt. Yes, he leaned back. And now we're here, in hiding. With 3 days before I must face the council and admit I've exposed our nature to a mortal without completing the protection bond. They'll see it as recklessness, weakness, proof that I'm unfit to lead House Ravenwood. What will they do to you? Strip my titles, absorb my holdings into another house, possibly execute me if they rule. My actions endangered the secrecy we all depend upon for survival. He said it calmly, like discussing weather. But their primary concern will be you, a human who knows too much. A loose end. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Alara watched them die, thinking of her own mortality, how fragile it suddenly seemed. 3 days, she said quietly. That's all we have to decide my entire future. Yes, and my choices are, bond to you permanently, die horribly at Corvus's hands, or watch you sacrifice everything you are to save me. Those are the options. His voice was gentle. I know none of them are fair. I know you deserve better, a normal life, a human husband, children, aging gracefully without monsters lurking in shadows. But this is the reality I've dragged you into. She looked at him, then really looked. Saw past the supernatural beauty to the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of centuries in his posture. He'd lived through wars and plagues and the rise and fall of empires. He'd survived by being cold, strategic, ruthless when necessary, and somehow, she'd made him care. Tell me what the bond feels like, she said. Not the politics or the protection. What it actually feels like. Chapter 6. The truth between them. Cassius was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant, as though reaching into memories he'd kept locked away. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability she'd never heard before. Imagine knowing someone's heartbeat as intimately as your own, feeling their fear spike in your chest even when you're miles apart, tasting their joy like honey on your tongue. He turned the glass paperweight on the desk, watching firelight refract through it. The bond creates a tether, emotional, physical, spiritual. You'd sense when I'm in pain. I'd know when you're afraid. Distance doesn't matter. Time doesn't matter. It's permanent and absolute. Alara's throat tightened. That sounds like losing yourself, or finding yourself reflected in another person. He set down the paperweight. I've only witnessed one true bond in my lifetime. My maker and his consort. They were complete together in a way that seemed miraculous. When she died, truly died by choice. After 200 years together, he lasted less than a month before the grief consumed him. He walked into the sunrise rather than exist without her. That's tragic, or beautiful, depending on perspective. Cassius's expression softened. The bond isn't slavery, Alara. It's recognition. An acknowledgement that two souls have become so entwined that separation would tear them both apart. Most vampires never form one. We're too territorial, too damaged, too afraid of that level of vulnerability. But you're considering it. With me. She needed to say it aloud. Make it real. I've been considering it since our third conversation. The confession came quietly. You were arguing with me about whether Shakespeare actually wrote his own plays. Your eyes lit up when you talked about the sonnets. You quoted Sonnet 116 from memory, and I thought. He stopped, a pained smile crossing his face. I thought, this woman understands love as eternal, as something that doesn't alter when it alteration finds. Her breath caught. She remembered that conversation early in their courtship, when she'd still believed in fairy tales. You remember that? I remember everything about you. His gaze held hers. The way you hum when you're reading. How you take your tea with too much honey. The fact that you're afraid of horses but won't admit it. You talk in your sleep sometimes, did you know that? You recite poetry. Lines from Keats usually. Warmth flooded her cheeks. You listen to me sleep? I stood guard outside your door most nights, making sure you were safe, making sure I didn't. He cut himself off. The proximity was torture. Knowing you were just beyond that door, vulnerable and trusting, while I stood there fighting every instinct that screamed at me to go to you. Instinct to feed? The question came out sharper than intended. Instinct to claim. His honesty was brutal. To mark you, bind you, make sure no other creature could ever touch you. Vampire instincts are possessive, Alara. We don't share. We don't release what's ours. It takes enormous control to resist those urges. And you tested that control every single day. She should be frightened. She should recoil from this admission of predatory desire. Instead, something hot and dangerous unfurled in her chest. Is that why you never kissed me properly? Why? You kept separate rooms. Yes. The word was rough. One kiss would have led to others. And the moment I tasted you, truly tasted you, I wouldn't have been able to stop. The bond would have snapped into place whether you consented or not. I couldn't risk that. Alara stood, moved toward him before caution could stop her. So you suffered, denied yourself, denied us both, to protect you, to control me. The realization struck like lightning. You made my choices for me, Cassius. Just like my father did when he gambled with my life. Just like Corvus wants to do. You all decided what was best for me without ever asking what I wanted. He flinched. You're right. The easy agreement disarmed her. She'd expected argument, justification. Instead, he simply nodded, accepting the accusation like a deserved blow. I made your choices for you, he continued. I told myself it was protection, but it was control. Arrogant, patronizing control by someone who should have known better. He stood, matching her height, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. So I'm asking now, what do you want, Alara? Not what's safest, not what's expected. What do you actually want? The question hung between them like a blade. What did she want? A week ago, she'd wanted her husband to love her. She'd wanted children, a home, a normal life. She'd wanted the fairy tale she'd been promised. Now she stood in a hidden cottage with a vampire who'd upended her entire existence. And nothing about her old wants made sense anymore. I want truth, she said slowly. No more secrets. No more careful omissions. If we're considering this bond, if we're even discussing it, I need to know everything. What you are, what you've done, what you're capable of. Some truths might make you hate me. Then I'll hate you with full knowledge instead of ignorance. She held his gaze. I'm not a child, Cassius. I'm not fragile. Stop protecting me from reality and let me see it clearly. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or relief. Ask anything. Have you killed people? Yes. No hesitation. In war, in self-defense. Once long ago, when I was newly turned and hadn't learned control. I'm not proud of it. I carry every death with me. Do you enjoy feeding? Physically? Yes. It's pleasurable designed to be, so prey doesn't struggle. Emotionally? He paused. I feel like a parasite. Necessary, perhaps, but taking nonetheless. It's why I use paid donors. Why? I never take more than offered. Small atonements for an unforgivable nature. Why did you become? She gestured at him. How did this happen to you? His expression shuddered. That's a longer story. One that requires wine and time we may not have. We have tonight. She moved to the cabinet, found the wine he'd mentioned, poured to glasses. She pressed one into his hand. Drink with me. Pretend we're human together, just for an hour. He stared at the glass. I can drink wine. I can taste it, but it provides no sustenance. No pleasure beyond the memory of pleasure. Then remember with me. She raised her glass. To truth, however painful. After a moment, he touched his glass to hers. The sound rang through the cottage like a bell, and Cassius began to talk. He told her about 1847, about being a soldier in a war that didn't matter, dying of infected wounds in a field hospital, about the woman who'd appeared at his bedside beautiful and terrible and offered him a choice, death or something else. He'd chosen something else. He'd always wonder if that made him a coward. Chapter 7. The breaking point. The attack came at midnight. Alara was still awake, sitting by the dying fire while Cassius finished his story. He'd told her about his maker, a vampire named Isabeau who'd collected wounded soldiers like broken toys, turning them on whims and abandoning them to figure out their new nature alone. He'd told her about the decades of confusion and hunger, the kills he regretted, the slow, painful process of learning control. She was beginning to understand him, not forgive, perhaps, but understand when the windows exploded inward. Glass showered across the room. Cassius moved with impossible speed, pulling Alara behind him as figures poured through the shattered frames. 3 of them, all inhumanly fast, eyes glowing amber in the darkness. Ravenwood, the lead vampire, smiled, revealing elongated fangs. He was handsome in a predatory way, with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of old nobility. Running doesn't suit you, Theron. Cassius's voice was ice. I wasn't running. I was buying time. Time's up. The vampire Theron prowled forward, flanked by his companions. The council has ruled in Corvus's favor. You violated protocols, exposed our nature to an unbound mortal. And worst of all, his gaze slid to Alara, hungry and assessing. You thought you could hide her from us. Alara's heart hammered. These were the ones Cassius had warned her about. House Corvus. The vampires her father had borrowed from, the ones who wanted her as payment. She's under my protection, Cassius said quietly. Protection requires a bond. Theron circled them like a wolf. Where's your mark, Ravenwood? Where's the proof she's yours? Cassius said nothing. His silence was damning. Theron laughed. Exactly as we suspected. You married her under human law, meaningless to us. You brought her into our world without proper binding. She's unclaimed, which means she's fair game. Touch her and I'll tear your heart out. Brave words from someone outnumbered. Theron gestured, and his companions moved to flank them. We could take her now, drag her back to face Corvus's judgment. Or he paused, theatrical. You could make this easy. Surrender yourself, accept council punishment, and perhaps we'll make her death quick. No, Alara's voice cut through the tension. She stepped from behind Cassius, ignoring his hissed warning. You don't get to decide my fate. None of you do. Theron's eyebrows rose. The mortal has teeth. How refreshing. I'm not merchandise. She forced steel into her voice despite her shaking hands. I'm not payment for my father's debt. And I won't be executed because vampire politics are more important than human lives. You're right. Theron's smile widened. You're not merchandise. You're evidence. Evidence that Ravenwood broke our oldest law, the law that keeps humans from discovering what we are. Your existence threatens every vampire in this region. Then give me the bond. The words left her mouth before she could reconsider them. Right now. Make me Cassius's consort properly. Then I'm protected under house law, and you have no claim. Alara. No, Cassius grabbed her arm. It's the only way. She turned to him, saw the anguish in his eyes. You said it yourself. Once I'm bonded, I'm untouchable. They can't harm me without breaking council law. You don't understand what you're offering. I understand perfectly. She faced him fully, ignoring the predators surrounding them. I understand that I die tonight if I don't choose this. I understand that you'll sacrifice everything trying to save me. And I understand that maybe I don't want to be saved anymore. Maybe I want to stop being the helpless woman who needs protection. Maybe I want to choose my own fate, even if it's terrifying. Cassius's expression cracked. This isn't how I wanted. Nothing about this is how you wanted. But it's what we have. She touched his face, felt the cold marble of his skin. So stop trying to make choices for me and let me make this one. How touching. Theron's voice stripped mockery. But I'm afraid it's too late for bonding ceremonies. The council has already ruled. She comes with us. Tonight? No, Cassius's word carried weight. That made the air pressure drop. You'll have to go through me. That can be arranged. Theron's fangs lengthened. 3 against 1, Ravenwood. And you're protecting a fragile mortal. Those aren't odds I'd bet on. The room exploded into violence. Cassius shoved Alara toward the door, then met Theron's charge with brutal efficiency. They collided like storms, too fast for her human eyes to track. The other 2 vampires moved to flank him, and Alara realized with sickening clarity that he was right. The odds were impossible. She ran not away, but toward the kitchen, her mind racing. What could kill a vampire? Cassius had listed the methods: stakes, decapitation, fire. She grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace, her hands slick with sweat. One of the vampires, a woman with red hair and cruel eyes, noticed her movement. The pet thinks she can fight. She broke away from Cassius and glided toward Alara with predatory grace. Let me show you how foolish that is. Alara swung the poker with all her strength. The vampire caught it one-handed, laughing. Adorable, she yanked, pulling Alara forward. I'm going to enjoy breaking. Cassius materialized behind her, moving faster than thought. His hand closed around the vampire's throat, and with a sickening crack, he twisted. The woman crumpled, not dead, but incapacitated, hissing in pain. Run. Cassius shouted at Alara. The cellar, there's a passage, I'm not leaving you. You have to. Theron's fist caught Cassius in the chest, sending him crashing through the table. Wood splintered. The remaining male vampire lunged for Alara, and she scrambled backward. The poker raised uselessly, then she saw it, the fireplace. The flames still burning. The oil lamp on the shelf, understanding, struck like lightning. Cassius. She grabbed the lamp, hurled it at the floor between them and the attackers. Glass shattered, oil spread, and when she kicked burning logs from the fireplace onto the pooling liquid, the room erupted in flames. The vampires shrieked, recoiling from the fire. Cassius grabbed Alara, hauled her toward the cellar stairs. Behind them, Theron's voice rose above the roar of flames. You can't run forever, Ravenwood. We'll find you, and when we do, I'll make her scream before I drain her dry. They plunged into darkness, the cottage burning above them, and Alara realized she'd just declared war on creatures that had survived for centuries, all to save a monster who'd made her feel human. Chapter 8. The aftermath. The tunnel was suffocating. Alara followed Cassius through absolute darkness, one hand clutching his coat, the other trailing along the damp stone wall. Her lungs burned from smoke inhalation, her dress was torn and filthy, and her mind kept replaying the moment she'd set the cottage ablaze with vampires inside. She'd tried to kill them, and she didn't feel guilty. Here, Cassius stopped abruptly, and she collided with his back. His hand found hers in the darkness, steady, grounding. There's a ladder. Can you climb? Yes. Her voice was hoarse. He guided her hands to the rungs. The metal was slick with condensation, and her arms trembled with exhaustion, but she forced herself upward. Cassius followed, close enough that she felt his presence like a shield below her. They emerged in a crypt. Moonlight filtered through crack-stained glass, illuminating rows of stone coffins and monuments to the long dead. The air smelled of decay and old incense. Alara climbed out, her legs shaking, and collapsed against the nearest tomb. Cassius sealed the tunnel entrance, then turned to her. In the dim light, she saw the damage. His shirt was shredded, revealing deep gashes across his chest that wept dark blood. His face was bruised, already healing, but still violent, testament to the fight. You're hurt, she said stupidly. It'll heal. He approached slowly, as though she might bolt. You saved us. That fire, it was brilliant. Reckless and brilliant. I almost killed you too. Fire doesn't kill us quickly. It incapacitates, causes agony. But without a direct strike to the heart or head, we regenerate. He sank down beside her, wincing. They'll recover. Probably already have. But we bought time. Alara stared at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably now, adrenaline crashing into shock. I set people on fire. You defended yourself. Defended me. His voice was soft. You could have run when I told you to. You didn't. Where would I go? She laughed. The sound edged with hysteria. I'm being hunted by vampires. My father sold me to monsters. My husband is one of those monsters. Running seems pointless. I'm sorry. The words were raw. For all of it. For dragging you into this world. For failing to protect you properly. Stop. She cut him off. Stop apologizing. I made choices tonight too. I chose to stay. I chose to offer the bond. I chose to fight instead of flee. She met his eyes. I'm complicit now, in this insanity. And I need you to respect that instead of treating me like a victim. Something shifted in his expression, respect mixed with something deeper, warmer. You're extraordinary. You know that? I'm terrified. The admission cracked her voice. I'm so scared I can barely breathe. But I'm also, she searched for the right word. Alive. For the first time in years, I feel completely, intensely alive. Even if I'm probably going to die for it. Cassius reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed soot from her cheek. His touch was careful, reverent. You're not going to die. I won't allow it. You can't promise that. No, his hand lingered against her face. But I can promise I'll fight until my last breath to keep you safe. And if I fall, I'll make sure you have a chance to escape. To find safety beyond this nightmare. I don't want safety if it means you're dead. The words surprised them both. Alara swallowed hard. That's insane, isn't it? I've known you 3 months. You lied to me. You're not even human. But the thought of them destroying you, her throat closed. Alara, her name was a prayer on his lips. When you stood between me and Theron, she continued, words tumbling out. When you fought 3 vampires, knowing you'd probably lose. I realized something. You're the only person who's ever actually seen me. Not my father's daughter. Not a convenient bride. Just me. Scared and stubborn and reckless and real. I see you. His voice dropped to something intimate. I've seen you from the beginning. Your strength, your intelligence, your ridiculous optimism about Shakespeare's authorship. She laughed despite everything. You're never going to let that go. Never? His smile was small but genuine. Then it faded. What you said earlier. About the bond. Did you mean it? The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Alara considered lying, retreating to safety. Instead, she chose truth. I don't know if I'm ready to be bonded forever to a vampire. To feel what you feel, to be tied to your immortal life, to give up everything human about my existence. She held his gaze. But I know I'm not ready to die. And I know that watching you sacrifice yourself for me would be worse than any bond could be. That's not the same as wanting it. No, she took a shaky breath. But it's honest. And isn't that what we're trying for? Honesty? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was memorizing it. Finally, the bond doesn't have to be completed all at once. There are stages. The first mark is shallow enough to establish claim under house law, enough to protect you from Corvus. But it doesn't create the full connection. Doesn't bind us irrevocably. Hope fluttered in her chest. You never mentioned stages before, because I was trying to give you full information. The complete picture. He shifted, and she saw pain cross his features, the wounds still healing. But if we're being tactical, a first mark would solve our immediate problem. Give me legal standing to defend you before the council, and give you time to decide if you want more. What does a first mark entail? A small exchange of blood. Mine in you, yours in me. Enough to create a thread between us. You'd feel my presence, know generally where I am, sense if I'm in mortal danger. But not the full emotional bond. Not the permanent entanglement. Alara's heart hammered. And you could do this now, here? Yes, if you consent. His eyes searched hers. But understand, even a first mark changes things. You'd carry part of me in your blood. Other vampires would sense my claim. And breaking it later would be painful for both of us. More painful than dying? Different kind of pain. He stood, offered his hand. I won't pressure you. We can run again. Keep hiding. Hope we find another solution before do it. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Mark me, claim me, whatever it takes to stop them from tearing us apart. Alara, I trust you. The words were simple but devastating. I don't understand this world. I don't know all the rules or the politics or the dangers, but I trust that you'll explain as we go, that you won't let this bond become a cage. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, right over her pulse. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing it anyway. She smiled, fragile but real. Isn't that what being human is? Choosing despite uncertainty? Yes. He pulled her closer, his expression intense. Then let's make you mine. Chapter 9. The mark. The ritual was simpler than Alara expected. Cassius led her to the center of the crypt, where moonlight pooled through the broken rose window like liquid silver. He moved with ceremony, though his hands trembled slightly, the first sign of nervousness she'd ever witnessed in him. It needs to be consensual at every stage, he said quietly, turning to face her. If you change your mind even midway through, you say stop, and I stop, immediately, no matter what. I understand. Her voice was steadier than she felt. The exchange has to be equal. My blood, then yours. The order matters. I give first, establishing my claim and protection. Then you give, accepting that claim willingly. He brushed her hair back from her neck, the gesture tender. It will hurt, not terribly, but enough to mark the significance. Pain and pleasure intertwined. That's the nature of vampire bonds. You're stalling, she observed. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. I am. Because once this is done, there's no pretending you're not part of my world. No illusion of normalcy. You'll be marked as mine, and every vampire who comes near you will know it. Good. She tilted her chin up. Let them know. Let Theron and Corvus and the entire council know I chose this. That I'm not a victim or a prize to be claimed. I'm a woman making her own decision. Something fierce and proud blazed in his eyes. Then we begin. He bit his own wrist without ceremony, fangs piercing skin with practiced efficiency. Dark blood welled up, nearly black in the moonlight. The scent hit her copper and something else, something that made her pulse quicken with instinctive unease. Drink, he said, offering his wrist. 3 swallows. No more, no less. Alara stared at the wound, her stomach churning. This was blood, his blood. The substance that sustained him, that marked him as other. That represented everything unnatural about what he was, but it also represented survival, protection, choice. She took his wrist in both hands, felt his pulse slow, ancient, steady, and pressed her lips to the wound. The first swallow was horror. Thick, cold, tasting of earth and iron and something indefinably wrong. Her body rejected it, throat convulsing, but she forced it down. The second was easier. The wrongness faded, replaced by something almost electric. Heat spread through her chest, her veins, like drinking lightning. The third swallow ignited something in her core. Power surged through her body, not her own, but borrowed, shared. She felt Cassius like a second heartbeat, felt the centuries in his blood, the strength and sorrow and stubborn survival. Felt his fear for her, his guilt, his desperate hope that he hadn't just doomed her to a half-life between worlds. She released his wrist, gasping. The wound was already closing. Now you, he said, voice rough. His eyes had darkened to pure black, pupils blown wide. May I? She nodded, unable to speak. He cradled her face with one hand, tilted her head to expose her throat. His thumb traced her pulse point, and she felt her heartbeat stutter under his touch. This was trust in its purest form, offering her vulnerable throat to a predator, knowing he could drain her dry in seconds. 3 swallows, she whispered. Equal exchange, he agreed. His lips brushed her neck, a ghost of a kiss. Then his fangs pierced her skin. The pain was sharp and immediate, like twin needles of ice sliding into her flesh. Alara gasped, her hands flying to his shoulders, gripping tight. But beneath the pain was something else. Something warm and liquid and disturbingly intimate. He drank, and she felt it, the pull of her blood leaving her body, flowing into him. Felt his satisfaction, his careful control, his absolute focus on taking exactly what was needed and no more. The sensation was invasive and vulnerable and strangely pleasurable all at once. 1 swallow. His throat worked against her skin. She felt the thread form between them, gossamer thin but undeniable. A connection that whispered of his location, his state of being. He was here, holding her, and she knew it in a way that transcended physical proximity. 2 swallows. The world tilted, darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. Through the bond, she felt his concern spike. Felt him fighting the instinct to take more, to drink deeper, to claim her completely. Felt the monstrous hunger warring with the man who'd promised her choice. 3 swallows. He pulled back immediately, licking the wound to seal it. Alar's legs gave out. Cassius caught her, lowering them both to the cold stone floor. She lay against his chest, feeling his chest rise and fall in imitation of breathing, feeling the bond settle into place like a new sense she'd never known she was missing. How do you feel? His voice rumbled through her. Strange, dizzy, connected. She pressed her hand over her heart, feeling it race to compensate for the blood loss. I can feel you. Not thoughts, but presence. Like knowing someone's in the room even with your eyes closed. That's the mark. His hand stroked her hair with infinite gentleness. It'll strengthen over the next few hours. You'll sense my emotions eventually surface ones, not deep thoughts. And I'll sense yours. It's not invasive, but it's there, always. And now I'm protected? Now you're mine under house law. Anyone who harms you commits offense against House Ravenwood. The council will have to acknowledge the mark it's done, witnessed by blood and moon. His arms tightened around her. Though it complicates things politically. How? Because completing the mark means I'm claiming you publicly, declaring you important enough to bind. It makes you a target for those who want to weaken me, and it makes me vulnerable to those who'd use you as leverage. He paused. But it also means you live, and that's worth any complication. Alara closed her eyes, exhausted beyond measure. The bond hummed between them, and through it, she felt his fierce protectiveness, his lingering guilt, his wonder that she'd actually chosen this. "We should move soon," he said quietly. "Theron will have alerted the council by now. They'll come for us not to kill anymore, but to demand we present ourselves, to answer for breaking protocols, for completing a mark without permission. How long do we have? Until tomorrow night, maybe less." He helped her sit up, steadied her when she swayed. "There's a safe house 2 hours from here. We'll rest there, gather strength. Then we face the council together, she repeated, testing the word. It felt different now, weighted with new meaning. She wasn't alone anymore, not truly. Part of Cassius lived in her veins now, and part of her lived in his. For better or worse, their fates were intertwined. She touched her neck, felt the sealed wounds beneath her fingers. 2 small marks that changed everything. That declared her not quite human anymore, not quite vampire. Something in between, something new. "No regrets?" Cassius asked, watching her carefully. Alara met his eyes, those ancient, dark eyes that had seen centuries, and smiled. "Ask me after we survive the council." "Fair enough." He stood, pulled her to her feet. "Then let's make sure we do." Chapter 10. The Reckoning. Council chambers existed beneath the city in catacombs that had witnessed centuries of vampire law. Alara descended the stone steps beside Cassius, acutely aware of the mark on her throat and the eyes that followed their progress. Vampires lined the passage, dozens of them, representing the 5 great houses. Their gazes ranged from curious to hostile, but all of them paused on her neck, recognizing the twin scars that proclaimed her claimed. "Stay close," Cassius murmured. "Speak only if directly addressed. And remember, they can smell fear, but they respect courage." "Comforting," she whispered back, though her hand found his and squeezed. Through the bond, she felt his tension, a tightly controlled readiness, like a blade waiting to be drawn. But beneath that, she felt something else, pride. He was proud she'd come with him, proud of the courage that kept her spine straight despite her terror. The chamber opened into a vast underground hall, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows. 5 thrones dominated the far end, each carved from different stone: obsidian, marble, granite, jade, and something that looked like fossilized bone. 4 were occupied. The vampires seated there were ancient. She knew it instinctively, felt it in the weight of their presence. These were creatures who'd watched empires rise and fall, who'd forgotten more history than humans would ever record. Cassius Ravenwood. The voice came from the center throne, a woman with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. "You stand accused of violating the Covenant of Shadows. How do you answer?" Cassius bowed, the gesture respectful but not subservient. "I answer that I acted to preserve a human life and protect House Ravenwood's interests, Lady Serafini, by exposing our nature to an unbound mortal." The vampire on the jade throne leaned forward, Theron, his face healed but his expression venomous. "By claiming her in secret, without council approval? She's bound now." Cassius's voice carried through the chamber. "Marked 3 nights past. The bond is witnessed and sealed. She falls under House Ravenwood's protection." Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. Lady Serafini raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. "The mark is recognized," she said. "But it does not absolve you of the initial violation. You allowed her to discover our nature before establishing proper protections. You gambled with the Covenant itself. I gambled with my own existence to save hers from unjust collection." Cassius's hand tightened on Alara's. "House Corvus claimed debt against her father and sought to take her as blood servant. I offered legal alternative marriage under mortal law, with intention to complete the bond once she understood what she was accepting." "Intention." Theron spat the word. "You exposed our greatest secret on intention?" "I gave her choice." Cassius's voice hardened. "Something House Corvus would have denied her. Or do we no longer value consent in our dealings with mortals?" The accusation hung heavy. Several vampires shifted uncomfortably. Alara realized with shock that consent mattered to them, not from sentiment, but from law. Ancient law that Corvus had been prepared to violate. "The girl may speak." The vampire on the obsidian throne, a man with dark skin and gold eyes, gestured to Alara. "Tell us, mortal. Did Ravenwood coerce this bond? Or did you accept his mark willingly?" Every eye turned to her. Alara's throat went dry, but she forced herself to meet the golden gaze steadily. "I accepted willingly." Her voice rang clearer than she'd hoped. "I was given full knowledge of what the bond meant, what I would become, what I would lose, and I chose it over death at House Corvus's hands. You speak boldly for prey, Theron sneered. I speak as someone with nothing left to lose. She took a step forward, ignoring Cassius's warning, squeeze. My father sold me without my knowledge. House Corvus claimed me as property. And when Cassius offered me truth and choice, I took it. If that violates your laws, then your laws are unjust. Shocked. Silence. No one spoke to the council like that. Certainly not mortal humans who should know their place. Lady Serafini's lips curved into something almost like a smile. Interesting. Tell me, girl, do you understand what you've bound yourself to? The implications? I understand. I'm connected to a vampire who survived almost 2 centuries through strength and strategy. I understand that harming me now harms House Ravenwood's honor. And I understand, she met Theron's glare, that some houses would rather see me dead than acknowledge I have agency in my own fate. Impertinent, Theron hissed. Honest, the golden-eyed vampire countered. Lord Corvus, your house pursued blood debt against a mortal who'd never consented to her father's bargain. That itself violates the covenant. We feed on willing donors or take blood in combat, but we do not enslave innocents. She was collateral, she was a person. Cassius's voice cut through the protest. A person with no knowledge of vampires, no involvement in her father's debts, no choice in being used as payment. House Corvus violated consent law. I simply offered her an alternative. Lady Serafini rose from her throne, and everyone fell silent. She descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing like a judge's gavel. When she reached them, she studied Alara with eyes that had witnessed the fall of Rome. You carry his mark. She touched Alara's throat, and power sparked at the contact, recognizing the bond, testing its strength. First mark only, shallow, but genuine. Her gaze shifted to Cassius. You restrained yourself, gave her the minimal bond necessary for protection, rather than claiming her fully. I gave her choice, he repeated. As the covenant demands, the covenant also demands we protect our secrecy above all else. Serafini's expression was unreadable. Yet here stands proof of that secrecy's breach. A mortal who knows what we are. Bound only by first mark, she could still betray us. She won't. Cassius moved to shield Alara. I stake my house on it. You already have. Serafini returned to her throne, settling with the weight of centuries. The council must decide. Ravenwood acted outside protocol, but arguably within the spirit of consent law. House Corvus pursued questionable blood debt, and this mortal, she looked at Alara, has shown more courage than many of our kind. Execute them both, Theron demanded. Make an example. Show that exposing our nature carries consequences, or acknowledge that laws must bend occasionally for justice, the golden-eyed vampire countered. Ravenwood saved an innocent from enslavement. That should mean something. The debate raged around them. Vampires argued centuries of precedent, questioned interpretations of ancient law, debated the balance between security and morality. Alara listened, heart pounding, feeling Cassius's steady presence through the bond like an anchor in storm-tossed seas. Finally, Lady Serafini raised her hand again. The council has deliberated. Our judgment is thus: House Ravenwood acted rashly, but not criminally. The first mark stands. However, her gaze pinned them both. The bond must be completed within 1 lunar month, or dissolved entirely. A half-bond creates vulnerability we cannot tolerate long-term. Alara's breath caught. 1 month to decide her entire future. Additionally, Serafini continued, House Corvus will relinquish all claims to blood debt against the mortal's family. Reparations will be paid for pursuing invalid collection. She looked at Theron, and ice crystallized in her voice. Are we clear, Lord Corvus? Theron's jaw clenched, but he bowed stiffly. Clear, Lady Serafini, then this matter is concluded. Serafini waved a dismissive hand. You're free to go, Ravenwood. But remember, 1 month. Choose wisely. Cassius bowed deeply, pulling Alara into a curtsy beside him. They backed toward the exit, neither speaking until they'd climbed the stairs and emerged into the night air. Only then did Alara's legs give out. Cassius caught her, held her while she shook with relief and residual terror. Through the bond, she felt his emotions crash over him: gratitude, disbelief, fierce, protective joy. We survived, she whispered against his chest. You survived. He pulled back to look at her, wonder in his expression. You stood